Hey everyone, I recently posted a project that I've been working on for a while, this prayer series. It took me a good bit of time, but we recently have it available on our website. It's been posted and available so as the video along with it, a countdown. You have a bunch of slides and different templates you can go in and edit, social media posts, all kinds of good stuff. But I wanted to do a breakdown of sort of how I did it, a quick run through of all the pieces that were involved, how to create this depth inside of these pictures, how to do this heart that's broken here at the end, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to go into as much as we can with the time that we have, and hopefully you'll learn something. So first, let's start with the brand. So I would really started here. I wanted to make this and figure out what the look's going to be before I dove into the animation side of it. Really my process is throw in colors and textures and different elements to see what works and what doesn't, and sometimes things don't work out and sometimes they do. So this one is made up of several different textures in the background. I think there's just a kind of a light gradient that you see here. It's kind of faded in, so not too much there. Then we have several grain layers, and these are just some super light, kind of grainy textures that I have. We have several different layers of that. That kind of makes up the background. Then we have the stars in line that I would throw in here. So we have this this starburst line thing. So that was a pack I bought a while ago, and then you can make that in Illustrator. And usually I would go in Illustrator, open that up, copy that layer over, and just paste it into Photoshop. Change the color if I need to. So there's not too much going on there. So again, I just have that color overlay, making that white layer. And you can do a lot of things within the layer style panel. So I just did a color overlay. It's just some blending modes and whatnot going on. You could add drop shadow and all kind of good stuff. Don't get too carried away. Just use this really subtly to create the effects you want. Other than that, we have the gold shapes in here, which are these just a box and a circle back there. You can see those back there like that. And those are just shape layers that are created through the shape tool, which is here. So I can turn off the fill, I can go to stroke and add any kind of color I want, and then I can click and drag and make this box. So you could change the color. Then I might take that and do some different blending modes to get maybe a gold effect or something. Then maybe if it's too orangey, too not quite the color I want, I can click on that again. I think I hit U on the keyboard. I can click up here and adjust that color a little bit. Maybe try to get some of that gold in there. See what happens. So I'm playing around with that just to get that look. That might be a little bit too thick, so I would do maybe one. And again, just mess around until I got what I wanted. And then we have, let's see, let me turn these off here. We have the main text, which in here I believe it's a smart layer. So I wanted to make this very easily editable without having to have 4 different layers going on to change all those texts at the same time. So you can see we have this dark stroke on the prayer. Then we have the fill, which is that kind of gold faded fill, and then another light stroke in the background, which is really kind of hard to see, but it's in there just to create some depth and interest to that text. So, but I made a smart layer first, so you can see here this little icon is a smart layer. So if I click on that, it goes into this document. So I can hit here. I can change this to a sermon or something, and I can hit save. And if I go back to my document, it'll update that to sermon. So that makes it nice and easy to edit. But we'll undo that, save that again, and there you go. Okay. Next is the tagline. Again, it's just a simple text layer. We have a heart in there, which is an alpha-matted heart with the blending mode on it to get rid of any white that was on there. Then this red line through it, which is just a simple shape layer, which we talked about already. The hands was a free vector that was available for use, so downloaded that and adjusted some colors on it. Added just a really small, subtle, let's see. So the praying hands, so it's a smart layer. If I double click on that, you can see there's just a really small little bevel on that, very subtle, to make it look a little bit more dimensional. So it's very subtle. Then we have some grunge layers on top of it, and that is just this kind of this, speckly texture blended with a screen mode to get some of these speckles all over the place. We have some clouds, and they're just kind of alphametic clouds. I made these a long time ago, and have those in different animations, but these are all throughout the project. So we have this one up here in the top corner, and they have a very small drop shadow on them to give it a little bit more depth. So it's very, very subtle. Dirt particles, you can see they're just kind of these little speckles on here. The Bible pages is just some I believe I just copied those from a website, made it look like a Bible page with columns, and then let's see there. So yeah, there's kind of the page there, and then I just blended it with I believe it's Divide. So the whole folder there is with a Divide, and it kind of gets that white text on there. And some various color overlays, so just some grain. So I have a pink glow that's happening over here. Another pink glow that's happening over here in the corners. Very, very subtle. And then some dust and some color on top of that to give it a little bit of a hue tint. And some selective color that can add a lot to the project. So it has this kind of messing around with those blacks in there. So that looks a little bit drab, and then we add that selective color, and it does a lot. So I really love selective color. I'll use it a ton. Okay, so I would save this, make it nice and organized, and I would go into After Effects. So then here is my After Effects project. This is what you would get when you download the project. So we have, usually how I lay out things for, at least for the projects we offer, is they're all built the same way. So you have your assets folder, which is kind of containing all the layers that build and make up this project. Then we have the countdown, that's what's an option. The final render, which is what you're looking at here, just to simplify things. If you're just changing something super quick, then you don't have to dive into a bunch of layers. You're exporting the main project, and then you have the audio layer in here. And inside the audio layer, you have the sermon guy talking, you have the music layer, then you have some sound effects. So those are layered, and you can turn them off or turn them on, or turn them up or down. Now we have the text layers, and this is where you would go in and animate the text that you see, as well as the working composition. This is really a lot of the nuts and bolts of the project. So where all the layers are going to be shown, and we'll go through that. That's where we'll spend most of our time. So how do we do it? How do I make it? How did I create this project? So let's go to I'm going to go into the main animation. Actually, let's go to working composition. And there's not a whole lot here. This is the main animation, which we're going to dive into. Then I have a few more effects on top, which is this lens effect. It creates just a little bit of a warp out here. So if I turn that off, you can see it's making this little bit of a kind of a lens warp. Very subtle. And that's really it. And there's some fade outs and fade ins. So let's go into main animation. So I won't go through all of the pieces of this project, as there are a lot of them, but we'll go through some of the ones that may be helpful to you, and so you can see how I did them. In the very beginning, we have the hands pop up right here. My computer may go a little bit slow because I have some things rendering in the background, but hopefully not too bad. So these prayer hands were a 3D model that I purchased, and added some texture and some light to them. And I did all that within Cinema 4D. Then I made my animation inside of Cinema 4D and rendered that out. So all it is, if I go to, let's see, assets, pre-rendered hands, 3D hands, let me double click on this. So this is really all that came from Cinema 4D was this 3D hands layer, and it just rotates. So then I would take that and paste it into my main animation. All right. Other than that, there's some lines around it. If I go into, so inside of here we have a bunch. All these orange are the text layers, and those are what can be edited. But I have a lot of layers hidden so that it doesn't confuse too many people. But if you want to see all those, we're going to click on this little icon right here, and it's going to show a whole bunch of layers. So usually I wouldn't have all of this going on. I would most likely break this up into scenes. So that I can easily find what I need. But since this camera shot is really all one take, and it just moves across one scene, I can't really do that. So I had to just try to keep it as organized as possible. So let's take a look here. We have all of these below here, all of these blue and green layers are these lines that are animating right here, and then you also will see some lines that they're kind of just scattered throughout the project to create some more depth. So let's see if I can find some. You can see them really subtly here. They're all out of focus because the camera's not, the focus is pushed past these lines, but it in the movement it adds some nice depth to it. So we'll leave those alone for now. And let's go back to these hands. Computer's kind of chugging here. So again, won't go into the hands too much. Those are just a 3D render. And then this was created inside of Photoshop, and I brought my layers in and then animated these. So let's take a look at that really quick. Let's go to, let's see, Earth and Layers, I believe. So I'm gonna double click on that. So inside of here, we have, and what I'm really gonna spend most of our time on is towards the end, but I wanted to show you kind of how these are made up. So when this animates, this for some reason was a bit hefty as far as rendering, but you can see it kind of pop up here. So I have a bunch of 2D layers, and then I added a little bit extra with the tree to give it some depth. So you can see when it animates, the tree's kind of back there, and it obviously looks pretty cheesy right here, but in the motion while the camera's moving, it gives it a little bit more depth. I have a layer of water here that was made in Cinema 4D, and then I just have a turbulent displace on that, so it looks like it's kind of rocking and moving. And then we have the mountains back here, which have been edited. So again, I made all this in Photoshop and then imported in that PSD so that I had it all together. And then I can make those movements with some simple animations. So with the tree, if I hit U on the keyboard, you can see the position and rotation is moving. And then everything is also attached to this null, which is flying up there. Okay. I won't go too much into that. We're going to focus on some other stuff near the end. So go back to working, let's see, main animation. So really how this is all laid out, if you zoom way out, you can see there's just a whole lot going on. The camera just goes all across this thing. And really the foundation of all this is by making a composition. We'll just make this 1920 by 1080. And we'll say okay. So this is my blank canvas. So if I was gonna make a bunch of layers and have them move around, is really all this project is I would say, so I'll make a new solid. It could be anything. So I'll throw this in here. I'll scale this down. So let's say, this is my tree image, right? I duplicate this and I move this over here, and this is my hands, and then I'm duplicate this, and this is the pearly gates that open up. So now I would want to make my camera move through these things. So what I would do is I'd go to effect, so I'd go to layer, new, and camera, and all this is fine for now. We hit OK, hit OK. So now I have my camera layer. What I do is, and really what I've learned to do through several tutorials, is to make a layer, new, and a null object. So think of the null object as kind of like the handle of the camera. So the camera is going to do whatever the null does. And the reason I find that doing that is easier is because doing the keyframes inside of the camera, it just becomes a bit tricky. And you have to set more keyframes than really necessary. So to me, it's easier just to add, attach the camera to the null object. So we'll call this camera movements. Okay, so I'm going to click on camera. I'm going to grab my pick whip, throw that in there. So now I have this object that I can move the camera around, but I need to make all these things 3D. So the camera is not going to do me any good if my objects aren't 3D. And the way you do that is clicking on this little checkbox here. You can see the little cube. So I'm going to make all these 3D. Okay. So let's say I wanted to move my camera from this object to this object and then up to this object. So I would go to my camera movement, and I want to set some keyframes. So I'm going to open this little dialog box up, go down to transform, and I'm going to do position. For now, we'll just keep position. So I want to move my camera over to this one. So I'm going to take my mouse on top of this option. And then you can see you have 3 arrows. You have your Y, your Z, and your X. So Y obviously goes up and down. X goes left to right, and Z goes in and out. Okay, so we're going to go, we're going to take the X, we're going to take this over to this guy here. So let's say this is my hands, and now my keyframe is saying that's where this is going to be. I'm going to move ahead a few seconds, and I'm going to, again, set a new keyframe. So I'm just going to take my mouse, put it over that X, and slide it over the top of this layer right there in the middle. All right, so now if we play this back, I'm going to set my bracket with N, and now I can just render this section. So I'm going to hit O on the 0 on the keypad, and it's going to take my mouse right over there, or take my camera movement. If you don't have a keypad and you want to do some quick rendering, you can hit Control-0 on your keyboard, and it'll render out what you have marked here, so you can watch it. All right, so that looks good, and now we can take our camera and move it again. So I'm going to click on my camera movement, hit V on the keyboard for my move tool, or a little pointer tool, and I'm going to click Y. I'm going to slide this up here. Okay, so now you can see my camera moves. It comes up. Now it's starting to add these curves to it, and it's just assuming that you want it to be a little bit smoother. That kind of drives me bananas sometimes. So to change that, you can edit it on your own. You can click here, and you can click these little points and hit G on the keyboard, or sometimes it gives you little circles and you can adjust it that way. For me, I didn't really need any of these, so I would just highlight these, right click, go to keyframe interpolation, and turn that off. So let's see, spatial, linear. Okay, so now it's just these straight movements. And then from there I would adjust some of the movements there. So you can right click on these, go to keyframe assistant, easy ease. Now it's going to make them a little bit smoother when they come to a stop, and then I can make that even more. I can make sure those are highlighted, click on this little graphic editor, zoom in here, and tweak these points. This tutorial is not really meant for learning basics. I'm kind of just showing you how this all works. So you can see that the camera moves super fast and then slow and moves up like that. So you can get an idea of how this project was built. Now, the next thing about 3D Space is you can really go anywhere inside of here. So if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to go past this, I could take this square, I can move it down here. I'm going to change the color of that. So I would want this one to be maybe way back in the background, so I can take the Z coordinate and I can push it back there. Okay, I'll move it up here maybe. So now instead of going up, I could go forward. I can take my camera, I can push in and kind of fly past that red one up to my new option here. And again, this is just the basics of 3D movement with the camera. Flies in, you can see that the planes are very different, flying past it there. The next step you could do with this is treat it just like a real camera and do some camera depth. So I'm going to click on my camera, toggle this down, go to camera options. I can turn on depth of field, which it is on. And then if it's not quite where you want, you can start adjusting some of the aperture settings and blur. So I can bump this way up. And then I can check my depth of my focus. I can go to active camera, go to left. So here's my camera, and the focus, if I move that around, the focus distance, click and drag. Let's maybe if I pulled that this way. So if here I'm focused on the red boxes, it pushes forward. And then I can also change that, so I can set my keyframe on focus. If I wanted to fine tune that, I can have my focus land right on that red line there, which is that white box. So if you get close enough, you can see how it's kind of blurring that out, but the more you crank up your aperture, the more sensitive that's going to be. So now you can see that white box is all out of focus. So that's how I would do a lot of the depth inside of the project. So anyways, that's the basics of camera movement and 3D movement. I won't go into that too much. I'll start diving into some of the pieces here. So moving forward, we have the gates open up, and again, this is a render out of Cinema 4D. Then I place that in there with some clouds. So we go to animation, zoom in a little bit here. So we have the gate, which is, let's see, here we go. Clouds, 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 clouds. The gate's right there. And then I added a few cloud layers on top of that so that they, and they're all in different 3D space so that, you know, they kind of move. Parallax really is kind of what you're going for. So they're all spread out here. Okay. Now if I go back to here, let's see, left camera. All right, we'll move forward a good bit so we can get into some of the other pieces that I made. This is just text animation, and I would just listen to the audio and then have these animate separately. And I do all those in pre-comp. So these are all little pre-comps here. So I can double click on that, and you can see you have different layers. You have this box around here. You have the box size, which you would adjust, and then you have some text layers, and the Desperate pops in right there. But again, they're just kind of moved around to match the audio. All right, moving on from that, we will go to, let's see, your composition. This guy here was just again, a Cinema 4D render out. I used a site called Mixamo, so I found a character, used Mixamo, and he makes, it's a great site for making character animation, so it makes my job a lot easier. And then I would add these little things inside of inside the project. So you have bow, hands, and kneel. I would just make all those inside their own little pre-comp. And there they are, and they kind of animate. Actually, I guess they don't animate here, but they animate inside of this one. So yeah, there's just a nice little kind of swing in 3D space. So I made those a 3D layer and then messed with the orientation. All right, keeping on moving, we're going to focus mainly on this section here, where the photos are kind of hanging down in 3D space. So we want to try to capture that same look. All right, so the way I went about doing that was I wanted to make sure I had a nice long comps that I had really made it way too long, but that's okay. So that they would kind of hang low and just had plenty of room to work with. So let's take a look at one of those and how it's built. I went to, let's see if I can find it here. Here they are. So pick string number 1. So I'm going to double click on that. So here's kind of the anatomy. As I have this long string that I found a very small piece of string, and I edited it inside of Photoshop to make it really long. So a lot of this is all duplicated and created one long piece of string inside of Photoshop. Saved that as a PNG to make sure there wasn't any background on there, and then brought that into After Effects. So that file looks like string. So it was this little piece right here, and then I just duplicated that to make textures, maybe string, to make this very long piece of string. And again, you can see no background on that. All right, and then I took the photo. So we go into photo 1. This is just a basic photo with a frame around it. So I brought in a photo from Unsplash or somewhere, dropped that in, and then I made a frame on it. So you have this pale yellow solid, which is a frame, and then I would draw a mask. So just turn that off for now. I would go layer, new, oops, not text. Go layer, new, solid. It's kind of this, pale yellow color, and I hit OK. and then I would draw a mask. So I'd click on that, click on my little mask button here, my rectangle tool, get up here in the corner and just draw a mask to be somewhat even. And then I would hit subtract instead of add right here. Oops, subtract. So there's my frame. Okay, then there's a texture on top of it, which is this kind of a wrinkled paper look right there, which adds a nice little effect. And I'm using a blending mode on that, which is overlay. Okay, then, so I would take that, and I just wanted to make that to where people could drop in their own photos if they needed to. So then I put that inside of the pick string, which is right here. So if I delete this, let me start from scratch here. So let me go to the photo 1. I'm gonna click and drag that down here. So there's my photo. Now I made this 3D, so I hit the 3D button, and I can drag that down. And I wanted that to be right on the end, and I'm gonna scale that down a good bit. So I'm gonna hit S on the keyboard, scale that down. And I have a nice little small shadow on that right there. So it kind of looks like it's taped on there. And so then I added some movement to the string. So you can see here, if I hit U on the keyboard, maybe it's, let's see, string U. Okay, so I added a wiggle expression to this string. So you can see on the string, let's see where the anchor point is. Click on string. So it's right there in the middle. So I just wanted to look like it was kind of swinging in space. And I did that to the orientation. So you can see it's kind of moving back and forth like it's swinging in space. So what I did is, what were those numbers? 0.2 and 1. Okay. So what I did is I went to the string. I went to turn off all these effects, transform, orientation, and if you hold down Alt and Option and click on the stopwatch, you get this expression option. And here, my knowledge of expressions is pretty low, but I use wiggle all the time, so I just type in wiggle, and then do a parentheses, and I would do it 0.2 and 1. So that's kind of saying I want it to move, I can't remember which one it is, but maybe 0.2 is the frequency, and then 0.1 is the amount, or 1 is the amount. Could be backwards, but anyways, it's kind of the more you change that. So let's see if I make this 5. So I believe the first one is kind of the speed, and the next one is the amount. So if I put 10 here, so yeah, 10 is going to change the amount to be wiggling all over the place. So I just wanted something super subtle. So 0.2 was the speed, and then 1 was the amount. So that's really it. So then I would take the photo, make sure it was 3D, and then attach it to that string. So I would do my little pick whip here and attach it to the string. So now it should move along with that, and it kind of rotates back and forth as well. So that's nice little movement. So then I would go and I would make, I made 6 of those, and then drop those all into the comp here. Then I moved them around in 3D space. So if I can highlight these, if I go to my left camera, you can see that they are all kind of in different spaces. So here's my camera looking this way, and then all of my photos are separated in 3D space, a whole bunch of different depths. And so when the camera is moving backwards, it kind of brings some into focus. Move this so I can see it. So some are into focus and some are not, based on where the focus distance is on that camera. So I believe this one's kind of starting to become in focus. And then as it gets farther and farther, they're going to go, they're going to kind of all go out of focus. So, and then the focus flies forward and focuses on just the text that's sitting there, which you can see. Let's see here. So it's starting to focus back to where this is in the 3D project. So I just would drag those in and move them around in 3D space, and I still can move those really wherever they need to go. So if I wanted to adjust one, I could just I can find out which one it is. So I can move this one down a little bit. And it'll update. So that's how I did that. Let's look at the heart section. Where is it here? Okay, so this one took several different pre-comps and layers to do. So let me find it here. We have clouds. Let's see, heart alpha. Let's see, starburst heart. All right, so here is the heart alpha. So I'm going to click on that. And then I have, this is the heart, and this is all the little pieces of that heart. So what I did is first I made sure I had the heart all by itself inside of its own pre-comp. So here it is right there. We have the heart itself. And then this background, which is just, let me go into here and see what we got. This kind of jittery text going on, or not text, but texture. It's kind of hard to see what's happening, but very light movement in the background. And then I put the heart on there, which is made up of this red layer and the actual heart shape. So, so then I took that, threw it into a composition. Let's see, I can try to do this from scratch a little bit. So heart main. So I'll throw that into a composition, and now I have my heart in here. And then what I did from there is I just started breaking it up into pieces. And this took a little bit of time, but I would take my pen tool, so G on the keyboard, and draw some masks around it, okay? Kind of like that. And then do that for a long time until I pretty much got all the pieces. So I'd click on that, hit Command D to duplicate, and then really would leave these here and start moving these points over. It's kind of hard to see. There we go. So start moving these points over. And really I wanted to make up, the other piece of it. So, maybe this is a piece here, and then I would duplicate that, and I would move that over here, and again, just slowly begin to make the pieces that I wanted for the heart. I want to make sure all the gaps were closed in so you didn't see any extra there. So I would do that until I had the entire heart, and then I would move my anchor point to a certain spot on that heart. So kind of wherever it would bend and rotate. I think I just do it right in the middle. So click on one layer, and then here's my anchor point. I don't want that to be right there. I want it to move from the center. So I'd hit Y on the keyboard, click and drag that over there, and I would do that for all of these. So Y, and click that and move it to about the center of that point. And then this piece I would probably put somewhere around in here. So then I did all this at the same time. So I would click all my layers of the heart. I'd hit P on the keyboard, and I'd click that position. I'd also hit rotation, and I'd click that as well. And then I would move forward, let's say, half a second. And then I would move these individually. So click off of that and just start moving them. So go back to my move tool and just do one by one. So click here, and then I'll probably rotate it by hitting W and rotate there. And I'll click on this piece, maybe slide that up there, rotate, click this, rotate, and then I'll do that again. I think it maybe moves 1 or 2 times, or 2 or 3 times. Move that again. Maybe this one moves this way, rotate, maybe up a little bit. This one rotates this way. However you want to do it. Really, it all depends on what you want to do. So then if I render that out, they move too slow. They kind of move. It doesn't look quite. I wanted to kind of make it look like a stop motion thing. So this is a little bit too smooth. So the way you would make it feel a little more stop motion would be to highlight all of your keyframes, right click, and go to keyframe assistant. Say toggle hold keyframe. Click on that, and so now they kind of move very stop motion-y. Well, let's see. Keyframe manipulation, hold. Oh, I didn't do the hit U on the keyboard. I didn't do the rotation, or position. So Right click on that, toggle hold keyframe. Now let's try it. So they kind of make a little stop motion movement. I think I may have moved those a little bit, so they're all a little bit different. Yeah, so they kind of move like that. All right, so I would do that for the entire heart, and then at the end of the day, you end up with, you know, this whole thing kind of breaking up into pieces here. So let's see if it. Yeah, it's kind of a bit to think about, but you can see it breaking up and sliding into pieces. And if you see all the keyframes here, you can click on these, hit U on the keyboard, and they're all kind of staggered, and they're doing that same thing. All right, so that was the heart part of the animation. And then think at the very end, it kind of flies up and goes through the clouds a little bit and reveals the logo. Computer's got a lot of things chugging right now, so it's a bit slow. So yeah, it goes all the way through the clouds. And again, all these things, all this, you know, while it feels like it's a lot going on, it feels complicated, it all comes back to that simple layout of the object. So, you know, you just start putting in piece by piece, you know, build it out, move them where you want them to go, and then you can animate your camera. And that's eventually you're going to get to a look like this if if you've layered in the right way, move them around. It just takes a lot of tweaking, a lot of trial and error to get it just right. So that really covers that. As far as usually what I would do is I'd kind of finish out my animation. I would render it out, and then I would take that animation, I would go into Premiere and then edit. I do all my audio editing inside of Premiere, so that way it's just so much easier to watch it in real time. And let's see if it's in here. Trying to cut audio and watch real-time feedback in After Effects is very slow. So I do all that kind of stuff, adding sound effects and everything inside of Premiere. So hopefully this will open up pretty quickly and we'll see what we're working with. Just taking its sweet time. There we go. So I'd have all my audio separate in here. So this is just sound effects. You can kind of hear the movements there. So it makes it much easier to do those animations or do those tweaks. All right, so that's kind of the rundown. Hopefully that helps you out. I know I didn't cover everything and I went through it kind of quickly, but we'd be here all day if I tried to show you every little baby step. So if you have any questions on that, if there's something in particular you wanted to see, let me know, and I'd be happy to answer that and try to go through it. But hopefully you learned something, and we'll do some more soon. Thanks. Bye.